Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. I want to start first by telling you a little bit about what the podcast is all about and why we started. So, as an individual, I have plenty of blind spots in all the companies that I've run and the companies that I've been part of. What I didn't know is what hurt me most. And the problem is, you can't see it, you don't even know about it. Well, part of what my company does is lay out the data so you can start to find those blind spots. But gosh, just looking at data sometimes can become really, really tiring and tedious because you need to know the narrative behind it. And that's the purpose of this podcast. Let's start to hear the stories. Let's start to hear the firsthand eyewitness experience of people going through and seeing blind spots where businesses have gotten stuck before, because then you can start to look for the data that'll help you push past it. This could be with employee engagement and retention, bringing new people to the table so that you can bring great employees into your company, but also improving your accounts receivable, your payables, your customer experience, just your sustainability as a company. It's all about blind spots in my mind. And I think this podcast is to help support people in finding those blind spots for themselves. So let me tell you a little bit about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. We've got some really interesting speakers coming up, and then I'll introduce you to Ray in a couple of seconds here. So on March 30th, we've got John Doan. He runs a captive insurance organization, and the title of his talk is Business Risk Made Profitable. Most people think of his insurance as something I pay out money. John's going to tell you about how you might be able to flip the script where it becomes a profit center for you. Really interesting topic. On March 25th, we've got Courtney Karach from Pesten. She runs a really successful pest control company, and she's coming to talk to us about why culture in a company matters. They have had a transformative process as a company and growth, fantastic growth. She's going to give you some insights into why that happens. On 3/23, we've got Edmund Mackey. He's going to be talking about delivering on a company vision and approach by using the numbers and the data to keep scaling. But today I've got Ryan Ray. Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
Doing great, Vinay. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm really excited to have Ryan because we had a conversation quite a few weeks ago now, but it was just a great conversation. And before we start talking to Ryan, let me tell you a little bit about him. And I've got his bio here. And Ryan, I don't want to embarrass you too much, but Ryan's an impressive guy. He's a results-oriented entrepreneur. He's got a passion for developing leaders and building collaborative partnerships across both public and private sectors. He's just leaning. His heart is leaning in the right direction, and his head too, which is what I love about him. Right? He started with sales and marketing from North Carolina State University. Before his role as CEO at Jobs for Life, he led the Triangle Entrepreneurial Leadership. He founded TEL in 2015, so you ran that some time ago. It was a safe haven for entrepreneurs to dream, grow, and lead their lives. Again, Ryan's always kind of leading with the heart and backing it up with the brain. And as CEO for Jobs for Life, he continues this mission of creating pathways for meaningful work and entrepreneurial opportunities for people. I love this. He believes that together we can uplift humanity by helping all people experience the dignity of work. Ryan, I want to stop there for a second. Tell me what that means to you. Dignity of work. I like that.
Yeah, it's quite compelling. You know, we live in a society where individuals really truly have barriers that would prevent them from being able to experience not just work, but the dignity of work, right? From the very beginning of time, you know, the Bible opens with God working, right? Creating the world. And he gave man the opportunity to co-create along with him, to use our gifts and talents, to be creative. And I believe that when we aren't deploying those gifts and talents, when we aren't using our brain, our hands, our heart, our voice, whatever that gift and talent is, when that has not been empowered to go out and be expressed, utilized to then create value in the marketplace. I believe there's a void that is left in humans, in human beings, in a human being. And so the dignity of work is this right to be able to experience life in all of its fullness. And so work, being able to do what is innate to us, right? I'm a pretty active guy, right? I like to keep something going. I like to keep something I'm looking forward to, something I'm building. And if I decide to I'm gonna sit down and just take a break for a little while, Vinay, and just kind of, after a while, I start to itching again. Like, man, I got to go do something because there's just always something that I can be doing, right? That's another conversation. But so imagine someone who goes a day, a week, a month, years without really having something that they've invested their gifts and talents and passion into, that can really begin to impact their dignity and how they begin to feel about themselves. And so the dignity of work is just this idea that through work, we can really, really experience that innate attachment to dignity.
So there's a couple of notes I made just as we were talking before we started here. And I'd encourage anybody who's listening in, tell us where you're connecting from. I'd love to see where people are coming in from. And if you are so inclined and there's something that Ryan says or that I say that you would like to hear more about, feel free to type something into the comments. But just start with telling us where you're connecting from. So, Ryan, something that I heard is, first of all, 25th anniversary of Jobs for Life. That's exciting. I'm sure that's been a journey.
Yeah, it has, and I can't take credit for the success of this amazing organization. I assumed the role of president CEO in 2018. But back in 1996, a pastor and a local businessman identified that they both had some needs. The businessman had a successful company, but it was a challenge to keep drivers in his trucks. It was a trucking company, pavement company. And so he told the pastor just over lunch, as they built trust and built relationship, he began to empathize for the needs there. And the pastor said, well, wow, I've got able-bodied men in my church and in my community. And, how about we see if we can help some people get work? And so they did that very successfully. But what they quickly found was that the challenge went beyond helping people get jobs and get work. It was really helping them keep work. And so having the skills and understanding the character and the things that go along with the dignity of work helped Jobs for Life to then begin to expand into a bit of a character-based job skill training program. And so for 20 plus years, Jobs for Life's been in communities helping to deploy this idea of character-based jobs training.
So sometimes I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but this light bulb is starting to go off in my head here.
Okay.
The average company is looking for good, willing, able-bodied individuals to do the work that they use to provide value to their customers.
Yes.
And you set up and create these people. I don't say you create the people are already there. You create the mindset where they can become those willing and able-bodied people who can help an organization. Am I connecting the dots there?
You are connecting the dots. And, and the first dot is just what we opened up talking about is this idea of when you really understand work and all of its glory, right? I mean, work is not a curse. Work is a gift. Work is an opportunity. Work is a blessing. And so helping people to understand the purpose and the intent of work and God's design for work. When people align with that ideal and philosophy, then now, yes, they approach work totally different than someone who's like, man, I got to get up and go to work today. No, man, work is an opportunity. And that's what we like to help people to really first and foremost begin to understand.
The other thing I heard is you said healing our nation through work. And I loved this concept. And this kind of comes back to that dignity through work, right?
Yeah.
Our nation. Well, why don't you explain? I think I'd love everyone to hear the way you talked about it.
Well, I appreciate that, Vinay. You're a phenomenal listener. As I've been in this role with Jobs for Life, and we've seen some uncertain some unruly times, over the last few years. And as we were approaching our 25th anniversary, I was like, man, this is such a unique opportunity, a tremendous lever that we can pull to be able to expand our reach and our voice. And so, but what's the problem that Jobs for Life can approach and attempt to solve? And as I begin to just look around and consider, when we look at our nation is broken, right? And if you look at the institutions, the pillars that our wonderful country was founded upon, our government, is divided, right? There's an aisle that separates. There's colors that separates. This phenomenal ideal of over 200 years ago, and then you look at our churches, in our communities who, for so many reasons, have either closed their doors and they're not sure how many people to let back in, and they're trying to impact communities virtually, and so that's uncertain. Then you look at our schools, right, and our children are home and not knowing when they can go back and be with their friends, and parents are struggling, trying to tutor, right, to teach their kids and understand now the challenge that a teacher may face, right, really seeing that. And then even our civic institutions, Vinay, the ones that we could call on for volunteerism, and we need you, come and help us. All of these institutions, these foundations, these pillars that we were founded upon seem to be crumbling right before our very eyes. But there's this one idea that tends to unite us because we can't really control who's next to us in that cubicle or on the line or whatever the job or the role is that we may be doing. And so we believe that work unites us, and work has the power to heal. And when we can have people in community that understand that, then that becomes a unifying element of all of our lives, regardless of what you believe, right? Regardless of a denomination, regardless of the color of your skin. Work levels the playing field, and we all, in some capacity, have to play that game. And so how can we take work and use that as this, again, unifier of people, of gifts and talents, to then begin to heal our nation? And when we can do that, I believe that we can begin to see unity, begin to see love, as well as empathy, because we all have a part to play. Whether you're the employee or the employer, you have an asset in your hand that, if leveraged correctly, can do a lot of good. And so how can we, as the employee, help this company or organization to thrive, right? And how can we, the employer, help people to thrive? And if we're all outward focused and service driven to really meet the needs and serve one another, we can do a lot of good, I do believe.
So the podcast, it's called Business Blind Spots Exposed. And I want to kind of bring part of why I wanted you on this is because the unique perspective that you bring to the table. Look, in running companies myself and a lot of the companies that I've talked with over a number of years and that exist, look, ultimately they say it's our people is the most important thing for us, right? And I say we're all in the people business. I mean, as we were saying earlier, we're all in the people business. And if you're not in the people business, I don't know what business you're in, right? So building this dignity for employees at your company is a phenomenally important component. Mm-hmm. What you do as an organization, as Jobs for Life, is take people and craft their mindset into a growth mindset, if I may.
Yes.
How does that change how those people react with the world, how they interact with their employers from where they started? Talk to me about that transformation. What does it do? What do you see?
Sure. Absolutely. I've seen multiple spectrums of an individual that could come into a Jobs for Life class, and maybe they're that person who, is very standoffish and doesn't engage with folks very well. Maybe for whatever reason, they told themselves I'm the quiet, shy, person. But as they begin to go through this class, it begins to build their confidence, right? And the other thing is, Vinay, is that one of the very first things we'd like for people to understand is that if you've been struggling with employment or even poverty, whatever the case may be, or you're in a job transition, right? And you're just like, man, I don't know. I had a successful 30-year run. The market's changed. My gifts and skills may not be transferable. Now I'm trying to look at a different career. Well, the first thing is helping people to see what right now you may just be in a little bit of an identity crisis, right? Maybe you've just been looking at yourself through a very limiting lens and not seeing the full potential of what's available to you. And then it's a function of, well, what barriers have been keeping you from not just surviving, but thriving, in your relationships, in community, in your work. And so when people begin to take the blinders off and begin to see the possibilities that, this job may be my first job, but it's going to prepare me for my next job. So what are the skill sets that I can develop while I'm here? How can I begin to build experience while I'm here? How can I begin to identify, that's the role I want. That's the position I'd love to have. Oh, wow, now I'm able to provide for my family. Oh, wow, now I'm becoming a leader in my community. And when people, I believe 100%, right, that when people begin to believe something, right, because we only do what we believe we can do. Right. When people start to believe, like hope is this phenomenal thing. But when you attach that now to belief and then strategy, it is amazing what human beings can accomplish. But so many people just have so much is piled on top of that hope, that belief. Right. But when you can start pulling that out for people, man, there's nothing people can't do. We were created wonderfully and beautifully with these gifts and talents and abilities, and just helping people to begin to peel away the layers of life and the stresses and the burdens and the challenges. And I think that's what happens. I tell people a lot of times we're in the hope business. When you can give people back hope, and now they begin to see from one small success, one small win after another, and then that belief starts to happen. And then they take that growth mindset. I like to call it an entrepreneurial or even an intrapreneurial mindset into an employer, into a workspace. It doesn't take long before they begin to rise to the top and become leaders in that organization.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, and I love that. And by the way, hey James, good to have you. Thanks for chiming in. I'd love some of your thoughts on what the knowledge that Ray is dropping on us. There's lots of nuggets here. And anyone else, please tell us where you are or what you're hearing. I love this pathway: hope that leads to belief, that leads to strategy. And what I want to draw out here is kind of the blind spot is that I think so many times people who run companies, managers, leaders in companies, believe that they need to tell people what to do. And I think that there might be a slight shift in how to think there, right? Yeah. You need to be able to guide people or invite them into a path of where to go. Yeah. I think that's what you do in building this confidence in people. As you build this confidence in people, you invite them to say, here's this beautiful future that I see. Mm-hmm. You want to join me in that future, right? Yes. The supervisor, the business, the individual, all win. Right? Yes. Everybody benefits from that. Something I say is, I can pay people for their minds, but if I get their hearts, I win.
Yeah, right? Absolutely, 100%.
Talk to me about. You talked about the transformation, but being able to invest in people and getting them to see that future that they believe in. Yeah. And you talked about hope, moving to belief, moving to this powerful place of strategy. Mm-hmm. How are people received once they go through the Jobs for Life program? How are they received into companies, and how do they do?
Yeah, but much better. And again, I don't take any of this credit. It's someone that's decided, I'm going to invest in myself and go through this program, right? It's the person, and when they've gone through a Jobs for Life class, they just show up differently. Right. Really quickly, if I could just frame this, I always say that when I'm telling my story, I've been so blessed and so privileged to have arrived. A lot of grace got me to where I am today. I grew up with both of my parents right in the home. That's a blessing, right? When we look at society today, both of my grandparents were in walking distance from where I lived. I grew up in a community where I saw men and women working, and showing that work ethic, operating in character and integrity. So I had all these social models, is my point, right? I had these social models. I didn't know they were mentors back then, but they were, right? They were the people in my life who gave me example. But I just believe that's what's missing in so many people's lives. And listen, with all of that, I still screwed it up, right? Right? Like I had no excuse. And so when I look at individuals who have not had those opportunities, those privileges that I was blessed with, I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, what could they do if they just had a little bit of guidance, if they just had a little bit of direction, if they had a little bit more information, if they had the right relationships and network. And so when they get that, they show up to an employer totally different than an individual who doesn't, who hasn't had that. And one of the magic bullets, if you will, to Jobs for Life is that mentor program, right? Our education, our curriculum is the bread, mentorship is the butter, right? You put those two together and we have really been able to help people show up a lot differently than they did when they first entered a Jobs for Life class. But again, I don't take credit for that as an organization or an entity. That's the way we were created. But people just have to be exposed to that. We need a few more cheerleaders, right, out here cheering people on and pushing people on and saying, yes, you can do it. You can do anything you want. And when people begin to believe it, I'm gonna keep coming back to that. When the belief turns on, it's like the hot sign at Krispy Kreme, right? When that hot sign comes on, man, it's a different world. When that belief sign comes on, when I believe it, it's a different game plan. And that's, I think, again, that hope business, that's what we're in. So to your question, people show up differently when they've experienced Jobs for Life and this idea of work as a gift.
First of all, Ryan, just for future reference, don't use that Krispy Kreme hot sign in front of me. I love that
total distraction, right?
That's right. I'm gonna have to use that one again. So I'm gonna distill what I'll call the first blind spot here, right?
Okay.
If you build an environment for people to see the dignity of performing in the role, that's giving them the space to exist and feel confident about themselves. Mm-hmm. They will show up in a different way. Yes. Right? That's what I'm here. Tell me a story. I mean, I clearly don't want names of specifics of who they are and stuff. Tell me a story. Give me. I'm a little kid still at heart. Tell me the fairy tale. How did it go? Where did it start?
Yeah. The story of JFL or an individual's?
No, like an individual. How did it start and where did it end?
I'll give you an example that I love to share. There's actually two that I love to share. But one, young man who, as I said earlier, had challenge. He was able to get jobs, but he wasn't able to keep jobs. Had some children early as a young man. And so one of those barriers that we talk about that a lot of times we don't consider, when the baby is sick and you don't have the relationships, right? I can't call auntie to come stay with my baby. So what do I have to do? I got to call in to work, right? And when I call in, I do that a couple times, the game's over, right? And so that was one of his barriers, right? He had the skills, wonderful chef, and companies knew that. But he could not get over that barrier that he had in the way. And so he came to a Jobs for Life class. And here's one of the things that makes, this is why I say Jobs for Life doesn't get the credit. When a person makes the decision, when they have the belief, he would walk. The first couple classes, he walked over an hour to be in a Jobs for Life class. And after coming a couple of times, some of the individuals in the class began to work together, relationship, right, problem solve, and help him now get to the class consistently. Eventually, he ended up with the car. That's a whole nother story. But he was willing. He made the commitment first. And then he got the information, right, which began to change his mindset and build his belief. Long story short, he came out of that class, was the valedictorian, if you will, gave a phenomenal, heart-wrenching talk of how he transformed in that short 8 weeks. And from there was able to go out and get a job, held that job, and then people began to look for him out in the marketplace. And he was opportunity after opportunity, door after door just began to open for him. And now he's moved away. I hadn't checked in on him in a long time. But that story really showed the proof of what Jobs for Life was able to do. Another really quick story: a young man who made a horrible decision in his life, actually murdered someone, spent years in incarceration, came out, took the Jobs for Life class. One of the young men who's actually now on our board began to mentor this guy, had lunch with him every week. Well, over time, he began to, number one, forgive himself, right? He began to invite his family back into his life, and they invited him back into their lives. So now he had those relationships. Now he owns a very successful company where he employs others who have been judicially involved, right? So again, and there's story after story after story of people who, again, a little bit of information, right? So some relationships. I believe that's kind of that formula: information, relationships, now tools, and now an individual's been empowered to now go out, right? If you want to build a house, you need more than the construction certificate, right? You need a hammer, right? Or just the hammer isn't enough, right? So you need both to then go out, and now you're empowered to go out and have impact, and really begin to take more responsibility for the success in your life.
So I'm going to wrap some of that stuff up into what I will call sort of blind spot number 2, right?
Okay.
And that is this idea that so first one is about this idea of being able to give people this dignity. If they can have the dignity to operate in their role, they will show up for you in ways that you couldn't imagine, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Number 2 is if you have someone who is having challenges in their life and you don't even know about it, you are not able to help them in the best way possible.
100%. That's the other piece. I can't remember who said it, and I'll let you go back to your point. I think Lincoln gets the credit, but he said, "I don't know that man. I've got to talk to him." Right. And then I think another way said, "I don't like that man. I've got to get to know him." Right. So we form these ideas without having first built relationship. But go ahead.
No, I think that's right on. I mean, Ryan, I have gotten to this point where I'm starting to find quotes that are just, they're just simple one-line quotes, and they're just so proud of me. It's like a ton of bricks just hit me. I was like, man, one of those quotes was, "Be kind to everyone. They're fighting a battle just like you." Right? I mean, how many of us jump to conclusions? We say somebody kind of cutting. I mean, I think everyone uses this example at some point. Someone cuts you off at a street light, and you want to throw them a couple of finger gestures or whatever, right? And then you kind of get up next to them because you're about to reciprocate the act, or whatever the case may be, and you see that it's a dad and there's a lady sitting in the back seat. He's trying to get to the hospital, right? Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden you wait. Oh wait, let me clear traffic out of the way from you. I was just there 3 weeks ago, right?
Absolutely.
So many times we just jump to conclusions about what's happening in their life, and we don't have, I think the word you use is grace, right? The grace to ask. Mm-hmm. And gosh, there is so much power in just asking that person and understanding where they're coming from. Did I get that right?
You did 100%. One of to talk about blind spots. I mean, I think one of those is, I've talked to several business owners, right, who are running phenomenal companies. And when I've asked them, when they look back over the success of their business or their company, does it look like the company that they started out building, right? And in most cases, the answer is no, right? And that doesn't make them a bad business owner or CEO. But what happens is when you as a business owner, you start out probably very people focused, right? I have this idea, I'm gonna build this company, I have this wonderful mission, man, we're gonna be able to impact. But what starts to happen is you start to get in this cycle, right? And particularly as you have success, right? And then it speeds up, right? And now there's more and more to do, and begin to lose sight of the real intent why you started this company. And now, instead of being the people-focused company that you really started out, you become a profit-focused company, which is necessary, right? And so what I like to challenge is, well, how do you now? Because it's hard, right? Because now you're in the rat race, right? So how do you slow that down, or not even slow it down, but how do you get out of it and now get back to being a people focused? Now you want to grow and scale your company. You start investing in people at that point, right? It becomes a totally different model. It becomes and you know exactly what I'm saying. And I think that's a blind spot, is that we begin to get and start having success, and we forget about the real reason why we got into this to start with.
So you and I are cut from the same cloth. Yes, absolutely. As a company, we measure people's performance. And a lot of people are worried about using measurements of people's performance as a way to beat people over the head. The data, the truth does not judge. It just simply is, right? It's what happens to the people who use the data. Right?
That's right.
If so, and how many times I got to imagine going through the Jobs for Life program, people kind of come in the door and they're performing against some expectations and they're just not meeting it. But what allows them to transcend and reach valedictorian in the class, right? Hit the grand slam at work when they first start working there, is that they're clear of the expectations that people have of them, right? And as soon as people start telling them from a place of, hey, I don't know what's happening, I would love to help, but here's what I expect of you, right? That person says, I can pull up my socks now and I can go and do
that. So true. It's amazing. I first saw it with children. One of my, younger nieces struggling in school. Some of the teachers and others had convinced her that she had a learning disability, and she bought into it. Long story short, I just began. This was 3rd, 4th, 5th grade time frame, and I just believed to speak and how much I believed in her. This is what I expect of you. This is where you're going. Started casting the vision for college and just career. And just gave her a totally different lens from which to look at her educational experience. Well, she graduated. I don't know how kids get over a 4.0 these days, right? Like she had the 4 plus, right? But it was just that the change of expectation, right? And it's amazing how people will respond when they have an expectation. 2 brothers, right? Same upbringing, same experiences, everything. In high school, one of them becomes pretty good friends with the janitor, the maintenance man. The other, not so much, just kind of does his thing. They get down the road a piece, start to have separate lives. They come back and interview both of those young men. One's done gone totally astray, just not living up to his potential. The other's done well. They asked them both, well, what is it that helped you, the one who took the other path, the better path? What was it that you feel like helped you and your brother had the same upbringing? What was it that you think helped you to make the better decisions in life? He said, I had somebody that I didn't want to disappoint.
Yeah.
And it was that janitor who had an expectation. For me, it was my grandfather. Like, I had great parents, but it was just, man, I don't want to disappoint grandpa, right? My papa. And when we have that kind of person we don't want to disappoint, or that person who has this expectation, that's a mentor, right? That's somebody that's your cheerleader. That's your fan club. And again, when people have that, I mean, yes, you're right. It's amazing how, again, they respond.
So I want to, I love that story, because I think coming back to a previous point that you said is that just this idea that people start with a people-based motive, and over time, as the company grows, the organization grows, the responsibilities grow, it changes to a profit-based organization, right? And it's short-sighted, but that's unfortunately what happens in lots of times.
What happens.
And I say to people, well, why? Because it's easy to measure numbers. It's easy to look at your bank account and track that because we've all got a smartphone that tells us what happened 13 seconds ago in our bank account. Right? But if people are really the most important things on your for your company, if you measure the success of your company with a balance sheet or a profit P&L, right? Well, then how are you saying that people are your most important things? People have got to be on that bottom line. If people are on your bottom line, then the profit will come along for the ride.
It will.
What do you think about that?
Listen, I mean, one of the challenges that that employers share with us is the struggles with retention, right? With retaining employees. And, we believe that comes back to people knowing that they have been invested in, right? When people feel like they are valued, that they've been invested in, that they are cared about, that's how you plug the hole in the bucket. But when you're profit driven, when you got to just get more, when you're just churning, right? You got to get more things out to market. You just bringing in talent, right? Just recycling people. And what we say is like, it may not be the long-term strategy, but when you begin to invest in people or create this culture where you're developing people, one leader says, well, what if we invest in people and they leave? To which I respond, well, what if you invest in people and they stay?
Yeah.
Right? Or what if you don't invest in people and they stay? Right? And so which would you rather have? The person that you invested in that has at least the potential to grow with you? Or would you rather just have a lot of people in your company who don't grow? Right? Who don't see the opportunity, who don't see the potential, who can't recognize and come alongside of you and say, look, how about we do this? Or have that, again, entrepreneurial spirit and say, well, you know what? I don't need my boss to tell me. I'm going to go fix this myself. I'm going to pick up the paper off the floor. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that the company has this type of culture. And so absolutely people and measuring the success and growth and development of your people absolutely is a determinant of the success of your company in the long and or the short term.
So I want to take a quick pause here. I mean, I have been just firing questions at you and listen because I'm getting lots of things going through my head here. There are people who are online. I would love to hear if you all have any questions or thoughts about what we're saying here. There's lots of, for me, there's lots of nuggets here. I'm getting a lot out of this. I want to share a story with you along those lines, that idea of investing in your people. I know somebody who works at Amazon. They recently got a promotion to a pretty senior level in the company. I mean, I want to say they're now director, senior director kind of level, right? Which in Amazon is you're swinging a pretty big stick there. When they got promoted, their boss decided to have it was over Zoom because no one's meeting in person in this case. And people all over the world and the country, they got all these people together and gave everyone, they said before the meeting, everyone's got $25 to expense whatever they'd like for meals. Right. Oh, great. So this guy who I know, went to the meeting and they said, all right, so the reason we're here today is because we want to celebrate a victory. We want to celebrate a victory of this person who just got promoted, right? Okay. I had no idea that was them. And they said, three big wigs from the company get up and say, I just want to say a couple of words of what this person brings to the table here. This person told me that it was a highly emotional experience, right? People are saying stuff and they said, I had a sense that this is when I showed up to meetings, this is what I did and what people liked about it, sense of humor in this case, and heard it over and over and over and over again. Yeah. And how does that person feel at the end of that? I mean, while the person was sitting down for this Zoom meeting with all these people, shaking at the knees is the sense and the feeling, because the overwhelming sense of gratitude. Mm-hmm. Will that person ever leave that company, as Amazon in this case? Probably not. Right? But what did it take? Was someone to take an hour out to just say, thank you. You kick ass.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And you got an evangelist for your company, right? You want to start finding more people coming in the door, lean into your people a little bit, and guess what? They'll start bringing people in for you. right?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Now he just became the recruiting arm of the company, right? Because now you want to come work for this guy. If your employees, when they go to happy hour at the end of the day and they're hanging out with friends and don't say, "Man, this is a great company to work for," you might want to, check yourself, right? Because I think that is one of the greatest mechanisms. There's a stat, and I've seen it as low as 30. I've seen it as high as 80%, and we know what statistics mean. But anyway, but that 30 to 80%, wherever you judge that number, of people who then get in positions, who get a job, who get an opportunity, is because of their network, right? Most people aren't being employed because they were found in a stack of resumes and applications. Somebody made a connection, right? It was because of that network. And so when employers are in this position where they're needing to hire and ramp up, I think your greatest opportunity is just that. It's the voice, it's word of mouth. It's the voice of your employees. Do your employees, it's the, forget the measuring stick now. But basically the question is, would you refer me to your friends and family, right? Like, does your company check that box? Would your employees refer, if I was looking for a job, will you say, yes, come work here? Or would you be like, nah, you don't want to come work. You don't want to come on. You don't want my job, right? And I think that's a measurement that a company can begin to explore.
So I'm hearing blind spot number 3, right? It's been a little bit since I've kind of wrapped some of this stuff together. I want to kind of tie a little bow on this one. I'm hearing investment in your employees solve a lot more problems than you think it does.
I think so. 100%. Again, so I believe that's my purpose is building people and building communities. Like, that's what fires me up. I love hosting events. I love bringing people together and creating these environments where people just feel loved and empowered. And I just don't believe there's a better investment than we can make as people than into the lives of other people, right? So many times we want an investment to offer us back a tangible, immediate return, right? We wanted to say, if $100 went out, how much is coming back in 30 days, right? Well, what if that $100 went out as an investment into the life of someone, that the return on that investment, you'll never see the fruit of it, right? Tangibly, right? Because now it begins to impact generations. That person who was celebrated, whose knees were shaking under the desk because of so much admiration and acknowledgement, you know how many lives he went and impacted that day or the next few days? You know how many people he told that story to? And unfortunately, bad news will go around the world before the truth will get out your door, right? And so we need more truth and good news stories going out, because if that same guy comes back and says, man, they didn't even recognize me, I've been doing all of this work and blah, 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 right? Man, that story will take off. Right. But now he told a different story, and that investment into him will produce fruit that the company can never measure. Right. You can never track that. And so when just personally, I just had lunch with a phenomenal guy I had the pleasure of meeting today. And that's where we landed at. Like, when I wake up in the morning and I have my health and strength, the next question is, how can I be of service to someone else? How can I go make an investment into the lives of someone else? Because you just can't outrun that return, right? Yeah. You just, like, if a father was empowered today, if a family was empowered today, and now that trickles down to their children, and then that trickles out to their friends, and now, man, it's just a phenomenal what happens when we invest in people. And so being able to, and I guess my goal here is just to say, when we can look out from a long-term perspective of the impact of a short-term investment or a right now investment, and say, man, you know what, this investment, this hour, this $25 voucher for lunch is going to go a long way. And I'll never really be able to put a number on that, but I know, because of the principle, I put seed in the ground, there's going to be a harvest of that.
So let's turn back to you a little bit. Jobs for life. Mm-hmm. How does someone look? I love the passion. Based on what I know of you and what I've seen of the program, what goes in and what comes out is a beautiful transformation. It's it's caterpillar to butterfly, right? If that's the analogy, that suits you, right? Whatever that
I love that metamorphosis. Yes.
How does someone use or connect or work with Jobs for Life? What kind of people do you create to shift the mindset on? What are the types of people that come out of the program?
Yeah, great question. We're working now to shift the perception of the model because it was developed, in that early track, focusing on those who are marginalized, right? Those who have those barriers to employment, be it a criminal record or transportation. Those people who really had those challenges, and where that's still very true. What we're finding in this climate is that people are now engaging in Jobs for Life classes who had careers, right? But now they're transitioning. People who now just don't know how to navigate this technology space as it relates to trying to find a job. People who now who's the workforce has outrun their skill sets, right? And so they're looking for community. So, to answer your question, and from a marketing perspective, you never say everybody, right? But these principles, Vinay, are for everybody, because we've began to lose touch with the true purpose of work. And our passion and goal is actually that Jobs for Life becomes a household name, not because of Jobs for Life, but because of this message of the purpose of work. And to begin raising generations who understand that work, again, is a gift. Work brings dignity. Work is how we love our neighbors. Work is how we, have enough for our family so that we can then give to other people. At the end of the day, we all want to do more, right? If I asked 100 people, if you had more, would you do more? 100 people would raise their hand and say, yeah. Well, how do we help people have more so that they can do more?
So, because the wheels in my head are always spinning, and something that you said here is it's not always people who are just starting at a low state. Anyone can start in sort of a medium state and jump into the curriculum as well. Do they have to be? Do the people go through the program? Can it be virtual? Is it in person? Tell me, how does that all work?
Yeah, very good. So prior to COVID, it all happened in a classroom setting, if you will. So we have partners all across the country. It could be a church, it could be a nonprofit. We actually have a class that is ran out of an apartment headquarters. So when there's a leader who says, you know what, I see the value in being able to use this program in my community, in my organization, that's where that happens at. But then with COVID, we, as so many others, we had to pivot. And so we at headquarters have hosted a few virtual models, and we're now teaching our site partners to also begin to do the same. So there are some sites who began to open back up and have in-person classes, but right now, for the most part, we're still encouraging that they happen virtually.
So I think I'm hearing two opportunities here, or two things that are at least popping into my head. Number one is, if you've got staff, employees in your company that they're not living up to the standards that you might expect of them, there might be some issues. There may be some support, guidance, some grace that they could receive through your program is one potential opportunity. So someone could reach out to you as an employer, manager, senior leadership and say, hey, Ryan, I'd like to be able to offer this option for some people so that they can pull up their own socks, right? I think that's one option.
Yes.
The other side of it is, on the other end of it is, there are people who are already going through the program who may be entering the program over time that could be candidates for companies. Because they're looking for fresh talent to bring into their companies. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Talk to me about seniority levels. I mean, are we talking people that will only be entry or junior level, mid and senior, or what kind of, talk to me about that spectrum of experience and capability and talent?
Yeah. So we would say on the, again, it's a tricky component, on the I'll say recruiting side, hiring side, we would say, entry level, middle manager, people that have had some experience and now looking to grow in their opportunities. But it's interesting. We began exploring this over the last couple of years, and even the third opportunity, because what we find is that in that middle management and even sometimes in upper management, that same company where the CEO started a people-focused organization, their leadership may have been promoted into leadership, not because they are good with dealing with people, right? But because they could do a job well. And so sometimes there's opportunity for leadership to begin to understand that empathy, that dignity, that grace for the people that we're onboarding. I consider myself a fairly traditional person, but in today's time, Vinay, and this is why I shared that element of my story of coming from what would seem to be an ideal upbringing, is that we are now having to respond to a very non-traditional hiring pool. Right, people who have some true barriers to employment, be it a criminal record, be it not having the skills, be it not have had the mentors, be it this might be they might be 25 and this is their first job, right? I mean, and so understanding that, how do we have that grace and empathy and being willing to invest in people and not just saying, oh, you showed up, you didn't do the job, bye-bye. What could be the value of an employer and maybe middle, upper management and leadership team having that investment? And at some point, right, you got to draw the line. But what could that look like if someone is very early on in their employment with an organization, if they were invested in, right? Understand the need and then begin to invest in them. What might they end up becoming as a part of your team?
So third one then is really that leadership training, or maybe I'll call it recalibration, leadership recalibration.
Yeah, I love that term. Mm-hmm.
So retraining existing employees, and I think the thread that runs through here is this idea of empathy, and that is inwardly facing to the company, but it's also outwardly facing, external facing to customers and or partners, people, other companies that you work with, people that you work with, right? Mm-hmm. And that persists through retraining of those employees, existing employees, bringing new people in from an entry, maybe to mid-level, as well as just senior leadership. I think is kind of across the board here.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's a lot of wheels spinning in my head around that, around that training and maybe opportunities that we should, if you're open to it, I'd like to talk about, because
yes,
again, as a company, we are coming in and measuring people's performance, not from but we call it empathized data, right? We're trying to understand the why behind how they behave, as opposed to just saying you drove too fast, you drove too slow. Because that's, the story I tell people is, if I walk into a doctor and say, hey, am I healthy? He says, well, how tall are you? He or she says, how tall are you? I say, I'm 6'2". He goes, all right, you're great. Thanks. See you in a year. Well, hold on. Don't you need to ask more questions, right? Looking at whether someone's driving fast as a good or bad behavior is such a very narrow view of looking at things. We got to assess the overall behavior, right? And what drives and motivates them, just as we were talking about here. And that idea of building that empathy into what drives and motivates them truly furthers the cause of really any mission, any cause.
Yes.
So there's an opportunity here to bring a lot of these people to closer to that empathy. Gosh, the wheels are spinning in my head. I'd like to. Well, look, we're coming up close to the end of our time here. I will tell you have given me a number of perspectives. For anyone who has been listening in and kind of watching along, I hope you got a lot of value out of listening to Ray. I think there was plenty of nuggets in there. Over the next couple of weeks, you'll see us try to see if we can tease some of those nuggets out, so at least you can get some of the highlights of what Ray has said. I think there's lots of good stuff here. You'll see it out in Apple Podcasts and Google Podcast, I think Stitcher and Spotify. So are also on a YouTube channel as well. And you'll see them posted out on LinkedIn. So thank you, everyone else who listened in. But Ray, first of all, thank you so much for spending some time and sharing with me. I come away from each one of our conversations enlightened.
Well, listen, I'm grateful for the opportunity again, just to spend some time with you and hear from you, and get to just get a little bit deeper look inside the mind of Vinay. You've been a phenomenal inspiration already, and I'm grateful for the friendship and the opportunity.